Well, at least you got the camera fixed. Uh, hello, everybody. Welcome to Game Masters Under Dark, where three game masters get together to answer your questions about tabletop gaming. As always, I am Will, joined by my cohorts, Matt and Matt. How you guys doing?
Wow. What is a
Good.
cohort?
Well, it's like above a sidekick. Like we're equals, cohorts.
Okay.
A group of
I'll
sidekicks.
trust
Look,
you.
look. Okay,
I
look.
don't know that definition.
Okay, here we go. I'll Google the answer. A group of people banded together or treated as a group.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you, Google.
Hashtag
I do
not sponsored.
hashtag not sponsored, right? Especially by Google. So first and foremost, I do want to apologize for last week. We know we didn't put out an episode, but we had one of us starting a new job, one of us having technical difficulties. So we wouldn't have been able to put an episode out even if we had done it. So we kind of I also had another class added to my class schedule for school, so we kind of took last week to regroup, get everything refocused, and obviously we're back now. So this week we are going to be talking about puzzles and traps. One of my favorite things, I think all of us here, Indiana Jones. I particularly like The Last Crusade because it's kind of a mixture of both of these things when Indiana's trying to get to the Holy Grail. I do notice, though, in a lot of our games at least, we don't tend to use the traditional puzzles and traps. So I wanted to kind of discuss maybe why or why not. We do that and what we prefer to do in place of that. So I think tonight's going to be a really good discussion. If who would like to start?
I can go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So I guess I can talk about why I don't do like riddles very often.
Yeah.
Because I'm bad at them. I'm real bad. I remember playing way back when I was just a player before I was a DM, and a riddle was presented to the group, and it took a long time for us to solve a simple riddle. And it was a fun riddle, though. That being said, it was very fun. Once we figured out what it was probably one of the better riddles I've played in D&D that I still remember. But that said, it just took a while. And I mean, the riddle was, here it is. The riddle was, you enter a room and there's someone was painting something. So there's like a palette and a bunch of black paint everywhere, right? And then the only exit to this room was a red door. And you had to find a way to get out of the room, right? And so we're just like, he described a bunch of other stuff. That's all you need to know. And so finally we come down to, oh, this paint has to do something. And then somebody's like, oh, I get it. Because I know the DM. I know what he likes and that kind of stuff. So they understood. I see a red door and I want to paint it black.
Paint it black. Yes.
Yeah, so,
as soon as you said
Oh.
red door, black paint, I was like, oh my God,
Right.
Is this what I think it is?
And it fell in line of like, it was a really good riddle, really well executed, great scenery, set design. all the stuff was set there. But because I didn't know the DM personally and my mindset wasn't there, I wasn't even thinking about that. And so I mean that's just call it on me, but like I just think riddles are kind of a hit and miss for a lot of players. And especially if you make them too hard, you're sitting there and you're like, well, they don't even have a clue. So I can't even really give them a hint because then it just is me giving them the riddle. And so why I don't do riddles is because I don't want there to be like a stagnant of an encounter. That what it hinders on is no longer the character's intelligence, but now the player's intelligence. And sometimes I can subvert the idea of the game where you're supposed to be like the super intelligent wizard and you can't even figure out this little puzzle. And so it's kind of hard. I've seen games where they've implemented like you can roll for clues and you give them clues here and there, and that I feel like that would works out. But I've never tried that, so I mean, that's why I don't use that kind of puzzle.
Yeah, and to that point, I actually brought them up because I was reading through them myself, and that's one of the things in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. They have like a section specifically about puzzles, and for I think almost every puzzle, I haven't gotten through all of them yet. Oh, military flyby. Sorry if you guys can hear that. I live right by the base, so a lot of shooting and airplanes and helicopters fly over my house. Um, but anyways, there's clues to each puzzle. So it'll say like, okay, for this one you might need insight or history or whatever, and it gives you the DC. And it gives you that. So I think, yeah, what you're saying, if you don't, if it's a puzzle like the one you presented, where if you don't know the person, you're not going to get it. You know, I'll say right now, like we all kind of like the same music, but I've never been like super, oh, I like this band, that band. So if I made a puzzle like that, you guys probably wouldn't get it unless you were super into that same band. Although I do really like that that red door painted like that's really cool. But what if you didn't know that song? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I definitely see where you're going with that. Puzzles are, I think, yeah, there has to be a way, at least in my opinion, for clues. But Matt, what do you think about puzzles specifically? We'll get to traps in a minute.
So puzzles and riddles, they can be done well. I've seen them done well. I don't really mess with them because it's excuse me, but puzzles and riddles, there isn't much you can do with them if your players are just stumped by them. With like you can make them roll for clues and that's fine, but if it's something that they genuinely will not know until you give them the answer, you basically have two options at that point. Completely scrap your riddle, or just you have to tell them the answer, and both of which are not very satisfying conclusions to that, especially after you've already wasted a lot of game time with just people going back and forth on something. Like, if they have to get to the next room and there's a locked door in the way, somebody fails picking the lock, somebody fails kicking it down, you could come up with a million reasons how that door can still get opened without them having to make certain checks or do certain things. Maybe somebody on the other side opens it because they heard some banging, knocking around. But if it's, you know, a magically sealed wall that won't come down until you speak the correct command phrase, and your players just will not get the phrase naturally, there's not really much you can do there without some serious like Deus Ex Machina stuff that really breaks immersion, or just simply going like, oh hey, your characters just figured it out because you were taking too long. Ta-da! So it's not very great in my opinion.
No, I totally get that, and I think it's funny that you talked about there being a million different ways to open the door, because the first thing that came to mind was like the Scooby Doo, like, oh, the book opens the secret door, like. I don't know. I don't know why that came to my head, but that's, I guess, one of the ways you could open a door. Um, and I like that as well. I think that's a good point. I'm not gonna lie. As you everybody who listens and you guys know, I'm still new, so I'm kicking around the idea of throwing in a puzzle or two or like a riddle here and there, just to see if it flows, but also making sure that like I was reading, you know, having clues or hints. And one thing I haven't seen a lot about, so I kind of want your guys' opinion on it, is what if there was, I guess it would truly depend on setting. So I know that's kind of the asterisk here, but we'll use my game for example. It's a game with like demons and you know, fiends and all that. What if, you know, there was somebody who say temporarily joined your party, which I'm not going to use this now that we're discussing it, but like they were pretending to be an ally, and like they kind of nudged you in the right direction. Would that be something, instead of just, oh, you guys solved it, kind of like you said? Do you think that would be like an okay alternative, or would it still be like breaking immersion at that point?
I mean, I feel like that's fine. That's definitely something to lean towards if the players can't figure it out. I mean, that would make more sense than just, oh, and then the magic wind scrawled something across the cave stone. Like, it makes so much more sense than to have a player be like, oh, I do know some information, and you'll like, yeah, nudge us in the right direction.
Okay.
Yeah, if an NPC is there and it's something as easy, or something as easy in quotation marks, we're talking about nobody being able to get a riddle in this example, but in real life, if there's 3 people, 2 of them are PCs, and one of them's an NPC, the NPC, or like the non-main character, non-player character, just isn't going to sit back and be like, no, you guys got this. You figure out the riddle. I'll just sit over in this corner and do nothing. I'll do my little idle animation like I'm in a video game. Like, no, them not helping in combat or like some great feat of strength or something like that, but everybody can contribute an idea to solving a riddle. So like even an NPC being like, hey, maybe that has to do something with bread or something like that. Just tossing something out there to sort of get the ball rolling is fine.
Yeah, I
Okay.
know when I put NPCs in my game, which I do, well, everybody does it, but I mean, well, I specifically like to put NPCs in the party. And so when I do that, it's always like I focus on the characters first, the player characters first. And if they don't get something, and then I'm just like, okay, hold on, let me roll perception on this little guy that's been following you this whole time. And I know when it comes to riddles again, though, I just thought like it would help if you write a riddle that is vague enough to have many answers, to the point where when your party's just like, maybe they've been spending like 5 minutes trying to debate what it should be, then they're like, oh yeah, Johnny's got a good one, Johnny's got a great one, yeah, and maybe it's not what you thought, but heck, it could work. You just retcon it.
Right.
Be like,
Yeah.
yeah, you guys solved it. Scratch out your note.
Yeah.
You
Good.
did
Good.
it.
Yeah. Good job. Well, and you brought up the time element, which was something I was going to bring up next. I guess, not having dealt with this, how long is too long? In that, do you set a timer for like 2 minutes, and it's like, all right, guys, it didn't sound like a long time, but 2 minutes is, you can get a lot done if you're hyper focused.
Yeah, when
So,
we were playing my game and y'all were debating how to use the wish spell, it was after that whole thing I went, all right, next time we gotta have a timer.
yeah, and that's kind of where I'm, or to go schoolyard, like, okay, rock paper scissors, like, I, I'm just throwing stuff out there, but at what point does that kind of thought process play into your design? Because you don't want to spend, even if you've got 3 hours to play, you don't want to spend an hour on 2 puzzles. You know
Yeah,
what I
that's
mean?
too much.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's something I've been thinking about when implementing these is, okay, like if you guys have a question about it, or if like I need to reread something, like pause the timer. That's not fair. I don't want to eat your time up. But once I've said it, boom, hit the timer, and like, okay. And essentially it's like it's a fluid 2 minutes, but once that's up, we kind of need a response. And like that's just an example, but how do you feel about implementing something like that, and what is a good time in your opinion?
So that would definitely depend on the group, because
Right.
I know there's some people that get a lot of fun and joy trying to figure out riddles and puzzles. Me personally, if it takes longer than 2 minutes to figure out a riddle, that's when I start checking out of a game, because then it just becomes going in circles, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I think the thing that it's a good thing you brought up the timer, but even when I have done riddles, I've always avoided the whole Sphinx riddle thing where you get one shot and if you mess it up, something bad happens. Like just if you just keep throwing softballs at the target, if you throw a million softballs, you'll eventually get a bullseye. So until people get tired of throwing, I think that's when you should cut it. But never do the whole you get one chance and then some deadly encounter happens when you get it wrong.
And you can kind of, I mean, of course, this goes on with who you're playing with and what kind of play style there is, but in a role-playing dominant party, you could tell them the answer, and then they could just role play how their characters would solve it. You could also, while they're solving it themselves, when they're in the huddle, maybe it is like, you got one shot. Yeah, they're giving you answers as players to a DM. They're giving you answers, and you're like, is that it? Is that no, it's not. And finally, when they get it, you say, oh, you got it, Jess, right? And then that's when they're just like, okay, cool. Now let's role play this out. And so like you would just, it just depends on your party. But like, I know for me, when the kind of puzzles I like to do are more like, I give you a bunch of lore and information, and then when I present you with something that either goes against that or something that plays into that, it triggers like a memory block for you. And so you're like, oh, these are connected. And then that's my puzzles. Like you just follow the string of clues that I leave.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're definitely Sherlock Holmes-esque with a lot of yours.
Yeah.
Which I'm not gonna lie, I had a lot of fun implementing with you guys the last time we all played. I think I told you guys that like it was definitely fun to watch the two different play styles and how much you guys got involved with it. But I like that style of puzzle as well. I like it a lot. It's the ones that I'm looking into though are kind of like what you were talking about, not necessarily like paint the red door black kind of thing, but still like simple puzzles. Because at least not to get out too off topic, but I think I've kind of established like a lot of this campaign is going to be you guys finding out information on how to win. So puzzles and mystery, things like that are kind of big, at least until you get to a certain point where maybe you have a party member, an NPC that like knows that information. And now it's like, okay, now we can kind of scale back on some of that and get more into the mechanic part of it.
And
So
when it comes to puzzles and everything, a lot of people have like the whole D&D trope mindset of like puzzles are like solving a riddle or something like that. That's a very D&D focused thing. But puzzles and riddles are really broad, especially in a role-playing sense, because in a manner of speaking, a murder mystery is nothing but a puzzle to solve. So in that regard, this group does puzzles and mystery all the time because I'm sure all of us, at least at some point, have done some form or another of a murder mystery. We don't do the very stereotypical of old wise man, standing by a magically sealed door and you have to figure out the riddle of, like the walks on 4 legs, then 2, then 3. Like we just don't do that kind of puzzles because they're very tropey, in my opinion. But that's
Traditional, classic.
Yeah, classic's a better word, but I like to subvert tropes.
I mean, and that still has a place, can still have a place in the world. But yeah, like it is very traditional. So if I were to pull something off like that, how I would do it is because I like to do it through lore. Through lore, introduce all the pieces they need. Now, the part that would probably stump the players is when they don't realize, oh, I was supposed to remember that. And again, that just puts it right back onto the players, not necessarily the characters, but the players. And now, if I've already given them all the information, I can be like, roll for history. Hey, remember that red cloth that you saw earlier? like that we would do that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think those are all really good points. I will go ahead and give this away. Get ready for some traditional riddles and puzzles, gentlemen.
Here we go.
But I think a lot of that comes from me being new and
Yeah.
it gives me something to work off of. Like, okay, I see how this works. Because no matter how much we talk about it here, you guys know, like, I'm one of those, like, I have to do it to see how it looks kind of thing.
I mean, and being a new DM, I mean, I ran my puzzle way back in the day and realized that didn't work. And so
Exactly.
when you run yours, you'll find out what doesn't work.
Exactly. And I've got a couple that I'm kicking around. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing set in stone. It's going to depend on what I decide when I have more time to work on things. This extra class.
And who knows, Will? Who knows? Maybe you'll be like the puzzle DM, and we'll be like, oh, Will knows how to make them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that could end up being my thing, and then you guys will be like, screw him, he's not running anything anymore because puzzles are terrible. No, and I'll agree. I'm not like the biggest puzzle person because I overthink a lot of things.
Can I shout out?
Of course.
Salt on the puzzle. So I got Beyond the Witchlight here. And there is a puzzle in this game that I was impressed with, that it gives you the answers. Of course, your DM should know the answers, but it gives you a puzzle that if it's too hard for the players, use this simpler puzzle. And I just love that idea, because I've played games where they've given you the puzzle and then that's it. They better get it. That's the puzzle. But like, this just happens to have like almost a fail safe, which is super cool. I love that.
Yeah, and one of the puzzles that I'm looking to implement has I'm tweaking it a little bit. Like, the puzzles themselves are the same, but the outcome of what it's supposed to be is vastly different. In that, if you don't get some of this stuff right, you run into, like Matt was saying, like a bad consequence. Whereas mine is going to be, I'll tell you, like, maybe you just need to get a certain percentage of these questions right, and like, you don't need to get all of them. And then as long as you get a certain percentage, it's like, all right, cool, go on. Because like you said, I don't want to bog you guys down. And if you get, I'm going to use a round number because I'm bad at math. But like, if it was 10 puzzles and you guys get 5, cool, you win. Bye. Like, go about the rest of your day. Because I don't want to bog that down. That's not the idea behind the game. But yeah, I'm definitely tweaking, because when I've read some of these, I'm like, this is cool, but that's not gonna work for this group. Like, I need to fix this.
I love a good puzzle. I once had a puzzle that was presented to me as a player, and it wasn't even, I don't even know if it was considered heck, we'll call it a puzzle. But it was just so well done that it didn't even seem like a puzzle, because all it was a game of like 2 truths and a lie. And the thing is that we had, like, going off on the lore we knew, we had to tell 2 truths and a lie. And that, I mean, it kind of was a puzzle because we had to recall the information. And it was pretty fun. I love that.
Okay, yeah, and that's, oh, excuse me again, guys. And that's really cool. And that's, like I said, I like the idea in theory of puzzles in riddles. I know we're kind of lumping them together because, like Matt said, they are vastly different things depending on how they're presented to the group. But there's also a lot of overlap. You know what I mean? So I definitely, like I said, it was just one of those. I was like, we don't traditional. We won't go tropish. We'll go with the traditional. But yeah, like, I realized we don't do those a lot, and I was just like, it's kind of interesting. You guys have any other thoughts before we move on to the next thing that we actually haven't done a lot of?
As a DM, just give your players a key and don't say what it's to, and then don't even come up with why they have a key yet. And then one day it'll come up, and you'll be like, you're presented with a puzzle and it has a keyhole, and then your players would be like, "Oh my god!" And you'll be like, "Yep, I planned that."
Quick story time about why I don't really like puzzles and riddles and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
had a DM one time decided they wanted to make an entire dungeon off of riddles. And when we sat down and started playing, it was like a 20 level dungeon, I think. And each door in the dungeon couldn't be picked, couldn't be broken down. You had to answer a riddle to get through the door. He looked up just riddles on Google in his
Classic.
phone on the spot, and that was the riddle. And every time we gave a wrong answer, it was a combat encounter that we had to do where we didn't get any XP from doing it because we answered it wrong. That's why I don't like riddles. Personal bias, yes. But ever since then, whenever a riddle comes up, I just have flashbacks to that 8-hour session where we opened like 3 doors.
Oh no,
It's a grind.
Yeah, ain't nobody got time for that. We definitely not doing that in this group because we
Especially
have very little time to play.
if I'm Googling answers, that's literally me also not knowing the answer. And so here I am stuck, and you guys give me a decent answer, and I'm like, 1 second, I'm still reading the answer.
Yeah. No, that's one of those things. Yeah, because one of the hints for the puzzle that I look at, it's like, give them this for a hint, and I'm like, okay, I'm probably gonna need to get like at least like a sticky note and write down some of this because
They're delicate creatures. Riddles are. You
Yes.
you either nail it or everybody's stumped.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
So-
that being said, if you are going to do riddles, if you think it's too hard, one, it is. And if you think it's too easy, it's probably just hard enough for your players.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You'll find riddles where you're just like, okay, this would be a piece of cake, and you'll not think anything of it. Then when you come to game day, they'll be like, what has 4 legs and hair? I have no idea. And you're like, come on, guys, it could be anything. They're like, okay, it just can't be anything.
Dog, you got it. Moving.
Yeah.
No, that's that I think those are all really valid points. And I if you are new like me and you're looking for some ideas, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, I've talked about that one, I think not as much as Xanathar's, but Tasha's definitely has more stuff for DMs than Xanathar's does. And there's a whole section on puzzles and riddles. So that's a great place to start. The DM's guide I also have pulled up. They have a little bit about traps, but really not too much about puzzles. And the next thing we're going to get into being traps, there's also a little chunk in Xanathar's about it, like creating simple versus complex traps. But there's definitely more info on that than puzzles. So moving on to traps, that's also another thing, except for I considered it a trap when I threw my trident and lost it in a stagecoach. That was a trap.
That was a tragic event.
It was. But again, just for a point of reference, when I say traps, I think what a lot of people think of, I'm going to stick with Indiana Jones, is he switches the idol out and that giant stone ball comes chasing him out, or the poison arrows, sticking his guys in the face. There's multiple kinds of traps, especially in D&D where there's magic. But again, from a more traditional sense, we haven't messed with traps a lot either. So I'd be interested to hear from you guys with your experience. Why not more traditional traps?
I think traps are easy to do. There's so much information on traps in D&D specifically. I don't know about other systems, but there's so much information about like how sturdy a wall is, how much cover it gives you, like what's the DC to break wood, that kind of stuff. Like there's so much stuff that you can do with traps that I don't think it's a problem of not having a trap in the game. It's like, how or I guess where to put the trap. Because I mean, you can have a classic dungeon crawl, and that's easy. You can put a trap around any corner, really. But when it comes to like a role playing game, I mean, that's why you don't see traps in my game. Because I mean, like, unless somebody's specifically trying to lock something up in like a specific area, nobody's really just putting big old endless holes anywhere. Which is probably my favorite trap, by the way, just a big hole.
Yeah, I was gonna say that reminds me of Pokemon. Jesse and James just digging a hole in the middle of the road.
I mean, it's classic. I mean, it's the big hole trap is great because literally every player has an idea like how am I going to get across the big hole. Like you can do classic throw the dwarf, or like people can fly, but then like some people can't fly, and like how do you help your friends that can't do that? That's my favorite trap.
Okay, hold on real quick. So even I get the reference, but for those who might not, throw the dwarf. Can we get a little context, please?
Oh my God, Will.
I said I get it. There might be others that don't.
Throw the dwarf. I mean, throw the dwarf. I mean, Lord of the Rings, classic.
Okay, but some people, you know.
I'm glad you get it, Will.
That's
Audience,
not the only.
Will has not seen nor read Lord of the Rings. I'm calling you out right now.
You know, I'm way behind on my fantasy upkeep. We'll just leave it at that. But I do get that one because I've seen the meme. So, yeah, no, yeah, the big hole's always a big one. It's funny because I was actually scrolling down on the page on the DM's guide, and it says fire breathing statue pits. Like that's literally the second one.
Will be a pit.
So yeah, and again, I'm kind of going through this poison darts, poison needle, rolling sphere. So those again, the Indiana Jones things is how I think of that. But Matt, your games, you know, the first game I ever played, I've mentioned it before, we were in the Feywild. But you guys both, and I think it's influenced me as well. We do a lot of urban settings, so you know, traps are not always necessarily a big thing, like Rich, you were saying, where maybe somebody's trying to lock something up per se. But what is your thought on traps and things of that nature?
I personally don't do a lot of traps because when you start adding traps, that increases your prep time, and I'm lazy. So that's just full disclosure on my part. Another thing that I think of why I personally don't do a lot of traps is I do a lot of social stuff in my games. I don't do a whole lot of straight up dungeon crawls and things like that. And even when I do something like that, there's always like factions in a dungeon you can join, you know, like maybe the hobgoblins are beefing with the orcs in the dungeon and you can figure out a way how to exploit that or join one of their sides. When I think of traps, I think of like very much so like Indiana Jones, completely abandoned places. Like you are going into this dungeon and there's not another living thing in here. Because you might have a couple of people that know where the traps are, maintain them, stuff like that. But a place with a plethora of traps should and would be quite desolate. So I normally think of like Egyptian tombs, catacombs, things like that. Something that is specifically made around something that someone does not want gotten to.
That requires prep time because you got to think of what.
Like traps would realistically, at least in the worlds that I create, would only be in tombs and crypts, places where not a lot of people should be going to begin with, or around liches' phylacteries. Other than that, maybe in like a rogue stronghold or a thief's den or something like that, you might find some traps. But especially with 5th edition, putting a lot less emphasis on traps, being a little bit less crunch focused than 3.5 was, because 3.5 add a ton of rules around traps, not just for the traps themselves, but I've noticed, at least with the people that I've played with, traps, I mean, you might throw in one or two just to keep the rogue happy, but now, there's plenty of other options than just like being the trap guy, where in older editions of D&D, you had to have basically a trap specialist in the party to be a viable party. You would have, your tank, your DPS wizard, your healer, and then your trap guy. Where in 5th edition, you don't really need that as much. So my play style has sort of evolved along with that. But now that you have mentioned this, Will, I will start throwing some more traps around, just to prove you wrong now.
I think it would be cool to have traps that, like, especially in trying to play with the idea of like, yeah, magic exists, and people who are usually level 1, pretty smarter than a commoner. So that being said, like, they can just be devious with it, especially in an urban setting. Like, you could have, like, heck, we can go all the way, the most devious way. Have a serial killer that just works in traps. That's a good one. I like that idea.
Well, now that I've sparked some kind of
and now it's a murder mystery puzzle and a trap game.
I was gonna say
Full circle.
Yep.
A serial killer living in a Rube Goldberg house full of traps. Oh God, no!
And you could even be like in an urban setting, like I'm giving myself ideas by just talking about this now. Make them non-lethal traps. And so, like, you could have that big boulder coming down, but it's really just you getting out of somebody's lawn. And then, like, it turns out to be an illusion or something.
Yeah. And no, as far as proving me wrong, Matt, it was, I don't think that was my intention. But no, it was just one of those, like you said, trying to read, the books. It's like I bought these books and then I kind of, thanks to D&D Beyond, not sponsored, but just because they have the option to search, I have not sat and read a lot of the books. It's just like, oh, I need to know info about this thing, and with the search function, I can find it. And that's kind of what got me going here, because with the next little portion of the game, I was kind of like, okay, I know how I want this to go, but I didn't want it to be like, oh, you guys can just stroll up in there. And we do combat encounters all the time. There's nothing wrong with combat encounters, but it kind of got me thinking, like, what if something I haven't seen us as a group do, like in a traditional sense? And that's kind of what got me on this thought process was, oh, like just a straight up riddle or a puzzle, like, traps. I've kind of already given you guys a little bit of info on where you're going. It is kind of abandoned. So, like, the idea of traps, or it popped in my head. That's where all this kind of came from, at least for me.
I like the idea of, and I've actually designed encounters that do this, but I've never got to execute it yet, of having either both puzzles and traps within a combat encounter. And those are really fun to play with, because then you just have both. You got to watch out being attacked, but also maybe there's pressure plates, and when somebody's on that, it activates something else in the room. And so having that implemented, and then your players being able to use either the trap knowledge that they just learned within the combat encounter, and then also being able to avoid it themselves, is very fun.
Yeah, and that's actually a really, really good point. I never thought about doing that myself. I'm, baby stepping it here, but
Yeah.
I like
the classic idea of, like, yeah, you got the pressure plates and like the poison darts come out. And so, like, mid combat, just have an enemy step on something, gets shot by a dart. Watch everybody's face just be like, whoa.
Yeah, again, I'm going to give this one to you guys, because I haven't found a way to implement it, and I don't think I will, because I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I like the trap from Temple of Doom when the ceiling is coming down with the spikes. And I was
I
like,
have done that. I've done that before.
and I was just like, how? What? So I know we haven't used Roll20 much or any like map things much lately. Again, not a sponsor, but I love Roll20. You guys know me; I'm a spatial guy, so I need the maps. And I found some that I liked, and I was like, okay, cool. This has exactly what I want. But then I was looking at it, and I'm like, there's no way I could justify like this kind of trap or puzzle or riddle, but I can't justify the roof falling down. So I was like, and the only reason I watched this all started because of my son, who loves Indiana Jones at 2 years old. He will sit and watch Last Crusade with Sean Connery, and he loves it when he does the thing with the umbrella and the birds. That's like
One
his
of the
favorite
best ones.
Yeah, it's like his favorite scene in the whole movie. So me and my son were sitting watching Indiana Jones one day, and I was just like, this would be fun to play with. Um, so yeah, I definitely, now that I've given you guys things, and now it looks like I got to be prepared for traps in your guys' games.
Yeah, watch
Or
out
at
now.
least-
You inspired us. You pointed out a little thing that we don't do very often, and we're like, well, we gotta make up for that.
Well, and that's part of this podcast. It's the conversations we have on a regular basis, just even off podcast. We get inspired by each other, which is kind of the whole point of this podcast, inspiring others.
I mean, and having you guys as players is great because then I learn what you like and what I want to put in.
exactly, and that's regardless of how the conversation has gone tonight, you guys know something is coming. But
right. We know, Matt, we know Will likes puzzles.
I don't, though. That's the thing. I don't.
You're not not after us.
But part of that is y'all know I'm an overthinker. So like you'll give me something and I'm like that guy, like it can't just be something four-legged in here. Like that is me. I'm the guy. But I just, like I said, I think it's an interesting twist to the games, because we haven't done, like I said, out of the three of us, of all the things we've discussed amongst all the games, that's kind of the one thing I noticed has not popped up before. So I'm glad I gave you guys something to think about, because
there's game systems out there which their whole entire system is revolved around like solving a puzzle, and I've never played those per se because I mean it's just not really a game that I gravitate towards. But that said, in the homebrewing community, a big thing that I always read is incorporate other games into your game. And so whether that be like a simple card game, chess, even that kind of stuff, like as simple as it is, it could also be as complicated as it is. So if you like learn a mechanic in another game and you're just like, hey, that worked out pretty well, you just adapt it to your world and you can possibly have like a really good like riddle mechanic to balance with your story.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot as well. And one thing that I've kind of been mostly focused on, but I've been toying with, is the Taraka deck from Curse of Strahd, which is essentially just like tarot cards.
Yeah.
And finding I know specifically like in Curse of Strahd, like each card kind of is a clue to something within that game. But it's like, oh, how could I adapt that to non-Shadowfelly Curse of Strahd campaign? Because I think it's a cool mechanic. But I also haven't, again, it's one of those, like, I've thought about the idea, but I haven't sat down long enough to put a ton of thought into it.
Yeah, it would require you learning how it works, then breaking it down so it fits into your world. So that could be like a few days.
Work. that's on the reading and movie list you guys are making for me for my fantasy stuff. That's on the to-do list for Christmas break between semesters, is figure out Taraka deck. But no, I think adding things from other game systems is a great idea. I see it as well all the time. All the stuff I Google, and I know, like I said, all the stuff we send to each other. Like that's almost always a thing of like, hey, I saw this in this system or
Mhm.
this game and I thought it was cool. Um, you know,
I've
so
seen a really cool story, not any game that I played or was ever a part of or anything, but somebody else's story. But it essentially was like while everybody else was doing a combat encounter, just a player and the DM, just a single player and a DM were playing chess. And what it represented was that single player was playing chess with his patron, and it was a very calm game, like almost like big bad kind of energy. There is calm, and the big bad's like, "Oh, you're not going to win this one." Then he would like try to do some stuff, but they're playing a real game of chess. And then the DM would take a break for a second, and then be like, "Okay, everybody, roll initiative," and like, and then while they're like protecting this guy who's playing chess with his patron, um, they're having a normal combat encounter, and just that's again just mixing a puzzle with combat is could be very exciting.
no, yeah, that's really cool. And I think Warlock patrons, especially depending on the one you go with, that's a really cool thing. Almost like
Mhm.
you're dealing for your soul at that point.
I think that's what it was. Like if I
Pro-
remember the story right, but it literally was like something up here that like he's gotta win.
yeah. So no, yeah, that's really cool. And with all of this kind of being said, I always like to bring it back to if you're new, like I said, what we're talking about, that can be daunting. I always kind of preface and asterisk everything. I have the luxury of having two very experienced DMs that I can go to and be like, "Hey guys, I saw this. Am I right? Am I wrong? How would you guys do it?" And I think you guys can always tell like when I have something like something's coming because I come to you guys. But I will also say you guys are great in that you don't pry. You're just kind of like he's asking, he's finding his way. Let's see how this goes. And you guys again never short on the feedback. If you feel like I need to fix something, it's there. I will say for anybody who wants to DM, if you can, play with a group that's willing to give that feedback, and don't take it personal. I say that I think every week, but that's very important. Like they're not calling you a bad person if you didn't do something correct or you didn't do it as well as it could have been done.
Yeah, correct is not the right word.
Yeah, you're new, you're learning,
Mm.
and I
I would
think I
use
brought
like sloppy. I've been very
yeah.
sloppy in the past, but like you'll refine yourself.
Right. Well, and I know like when we did that first session for the new game, I know I brought it up where I was like, scene here, scene there. Matt, after the game, I was like, what do you guys think? And you're like, it was like really good, except like you could have done this different. Okay, cool. Like I didn't take that personal. I was like, that's good feedback. I think we all also remember I was sick when that happened, but I was like, and I threw that out there, but I was like, but I appreciated that you were like, you didn't take it easy on me. You're like, hey, I get you're sick, but if you're gonna do it, you gotta do it right. and that's one of those things that it's helped me, and I can at least say that I feel like I've grown after each session, no matter how long it is. Um, like with Matt, when we did your clue thing the last session we played, I could tell you weren't as into it as Matt. So I was like, yeah, you don't find it, you know what? But this is here. Let's move you to the next thing. And I didn't fiddle with it. I was just like, nope, you don't find it, but you do get this. Okay, let's go there. Okay, you didn't find that. Okay, let's go here, because I could tell you that this wasn't more your thing. And I've learned to identify that and not bog down the session with, well, you're going to find this or we're stuck here.
Yeah, and it's not that I wasn't having fun or anything. Like the game was definitely fun, but everybody enjoys different of the pillars of play. I haven't met anybody that just completely doesn't like one of them at all, but I know which pillar my favorite is, and I other people have different pillars that are their favorite. I don't not like any of them, but I mean, puzzles and riddles, I'll do them every now and then. Would I want to play an entire campaign based around them?
No.
Probably not. But they're fine, every now and then.
Right, right. Well, and that's why I said like it was one of those like I established like I know you guys may not like this right now, but this is like a thing to establish the background and the lore, kind of get you guys going, and you guys know you're coming together, so you guys will be able to share that information if you so choose. Whoa.
Wow, she's not graceful with it.
But yeah, so I think those are things that I, as a new DM, we talk about a lot of things that seem kind of advanced. Sometimes I think, even for me,
Yeah.
but that's the whole part of this, this show, and whether you watch the video or you listen to the podcast.
I know when I was DMing to begin with, I stayed away from magic, guns, and traps and riddles just because I was like, I don't know really how to handle those things yet. So it's like stuff you just gotta work up to. My first game that I ever played, I was like, magic doesn't exist, y'all. I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, the first game I played in was in the Feywild, so I'm like, I better learn how magic works real fast.
Yeah, there was no training wheels on that game. It was surprise.
Yeah.
But like being a new DM and going after these concepts, I think all that it takes, I mean, you don't even need to study really. Just roll for it. see what happens.
Yeah.
Just put your players in front of in front of a riddle and have them come up with the first guess that they come up with. Then you just roll to see if it's correct.
Yeah.
And then just have fun with it. And then eventually down the line, you'll be like, I can work on that and study and learn how to make a little bit more complicated trap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I know that's something that I do regularly, where all of us, even though we use digital things to play, I think all of us still keep like a couple of D20s and stuff near us, because it's like, hold on a second, I don't need you guys to see this roll. Okay, so here's what's gonna happen. I know, Matt, you do that all the time when you're like, hold on, where are my dice? And like I think that's still a big thing, no matter how digital we go. I'm still gonna be analog. I love rolling dice. I'm always looking to buy new ones.
And like, I mean, it just goes back to the DM. I think when it comes to traps, riddles, and all of that is, if the player suggests a good answer, just let them have it. Like, especially if you're like, well, that was pretty good. Yeah, just let them have it. Like, have fun with it. I mean, they're supposed to solve the puzzle anyway. Like, I mean, you just let them have it.
Yeah.
And then the second thing would be like, when it comes to traps and stuff, if a trap's like too deadly and stuff, you got to tone it down. And especially if they're supposed to live through it. That's the idea. If it's going into the dungeon being like, you guys could die. Okay, yeah, maybe they do die. Maybe you did make it like that. But like going into the dungeon being like, and see you next week. Maybe you just roll a dice and be like, okay, you got real hurt, but you're alive. You're fine. And you're through the trap.
Well, and I'm actually glad you brought that up, because it was something I forgot to mention when we talked about traps. Is in the DMG in Chapter 5. I'm looking at it right now.
I was about to say, you know the chapter. Damn.
No, look, my man's prepared.
Look, man, you're talking to somebody who originally wanted to be a lawyer, who went to a history major, who's now doing business. If anything, I know how to research and do market trends, because I also did advertising.
5, page 3, column 12 says.
Yeah, I am. If anything, if nothing, I am prepared. But it does actually say like trap save DCs and attack bonuses.
Yeah,
and there's a damage severity by level. So if you like you were saying here, if you have a group of we'll use you guys, your 5th level, so a setback is 2d10s, but deadly is 10d10. Now, I'm obviously not going to do that to you guys this early in the campaign. That's ridiculous. But that covers from 5th to 10th level. So maybe by the time you get to 9th level, somebody might die. It's
9th level. I'm just walking through traps.
But you know what I mean? So again, that's why I always say too, when you're new, just look it up, look in the books, It's something I'm still doing, and still like need to make time to sit and read these after I read Lord of the Rings. And
That, that's
I
a
love every
that's
time I
a
bring
puzzle in of itself. Good luck.
I love every time I bring it up though. Even with like Matt's glasses, his eyes get real wide. Like, how could you not? And that stern dad look of how I'm not mad. I'm disappointed.
And that's exactly how I feel.
What is your favorite fantasy media, Will? Fantasy
Historical,
being broad.
historical fiction.
Okay.
It's a lot of like I read the Redwall series growing up as a kid. I really
Oh
like
yeah, we
those.
talked about that. That's
I did.
cool.
It's been a long time, so I don't remember a lot of the stories.
I wrote a whole entire
well.
game. I'll bring it up anytime someone talks about Redwall. I wrote a whole entire game about little forest creatures. I made maps, topography maps, city maps, all kinds of stuff, and it never got played.
Well, I'm down whenever you're ready if you still got it. But
Of course I do. It's literally right here. This whole book, dude.
Well, stay tuned, guys. If we start playing this game, we'll update you every week. But
That'll
no,
be on our Let's Play channel.
exactly. But no, as I kind of got older, like I told you guys, and I'm not afraid to. I think a lot of people who I know I'm a few years older than you guys, but in a certain age group where
You.
like I don't look it right, but I would definitely say like people that are in their early to mid 30s. I'm going to leave it there, but we're part of a generation where it was like even if you were into nerd culture, you kind of kept that to yourself, and it hasn't been until the last few years where like it's cool to like with the Marvel movies becoming bigger, Lord of the Rings, where it's like okay to express your nerdiness. And I'm like still super like I'm still super late in joining that. There's still a lot of things where I'm like, do I you know what I mean? Like it's still one of those things I'm trying to traverse through.
You're in a safe space, Will.
Well, and that's one of the I told you guys off camera, but I'll say it here. That's why I told you guys I like hanging out, and I'm glad we've become friends because it does actually feel like that. You know what I mean? Of like, okay, I can't talk about this with my brother, my mom, like my wife. Like, there's nobody else I can talk to, but you guys, I can just like get in our group chat and be like, oh, so I have a question.
I don't Redwall mice.
Right now, I'm gonna have to go back. Hey, look, I got a good excuse to reread him because as my son gets older, he's gonna need to read for school. I got an excuse to go buy
things. I reread it just maybe a year or two ago, and I forgot like they kind of deal with like real world stuff, like, and it can kind of get dark too.
Yeah, there's a couple of them where it's like this dude is dead, not like they don't like allude like fade to black. It's like, oh no, he's been murdered.
Yeah,
very explicit.
Shout out to Redwall.
Right? If you guys haven't read it, get on it. It's a good book. I don't even know how many books they're up to when I quit reading it, but
a lot.
I'll say yeah, that's tangential. But
look for it in your local Scholastic.
Yeah. But oh no, I didn't turn off one. Oh, that was the notification. I forgot to turn my emails off. But
I thought
yeah.
you were about to say you weren't recording this whole time. I was like, Will.
I would have just left the call at that point. I just would have been like, well, that's my one take, guys. Sorry.
Oh no. No, not that. But yeah, so do you guys have any final thoughts? We kind of went off the rails a little bit here at the end, but any thoughts on puzzles, traps, riddles, and their I know you guys have kind of already said it, but kind of your thoughts changed a little bit.
I mean, my thoughts have changed a little bit to the point where if I'm doing any preparation, I might think about a riddle or a trap and how to put that into a game a little bit more often. But I will leave on a tip for anybody really is try to implement something simple like a game of Old Maid or something. And that could be a trap. And then try, like, if you think about it, have it, and then just upscale it. Be like, okay, how can I make Old Maid work with statues that the players have to move themselves? Suddenly a strength check's involved. And like you can like do stuff like that. I know at one point I had the characters played chess, but the chess pieces were alive like Harry Potter, but like the characters, like a warlock could have choose the chess piece barbarian. So suddenly the warlock's using barbarian things. And you still had the idea of like, you can still do your charisma checks, warlock, but also now you're rolling for a barbarian. It's like playing D&D and D&D. There you go.
Deception.
Yeah.
Right.
And so like tip, just like try to take a simple game and change it to fit in a dungeon or something.
I like that. Matt, your thoughts?
Give your players a heads up before the session. I feel like, oddly enough, this really isn't something that needs to be gone over extensively in session 0, like with blinds and veils and everything like that. But before the session, especially if your group hasn't done it or isn't used to doing it, be like, hey, I'm thinking about throwing in a riddle in this session. So buckle up, be in the right mindset for it.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, we'll reevaluate, discuss whether you liked it or not, because some people are going to be like, heck yeah, riddle, this is great. And I've played with other people where if riddles get brought up, they'll just leave mid-session because they're just not down for that kind of gameplay. I have seen more people get up and leave a table over a riddle than anything else in D&D. So,
Okay.
yes, make sure your players are in the right headspace for riddles.
Yeah, that kind of calls back to the idea of like, since I put so much lore into my game, if you're just not paying attention to it, and then yeah, when you get to the riddle, you'll miss it. So like giving them the warnings great, so they can be like, all right, I just gotta mentally note all these little details.
Yeah. Well, consider this your guys' warning. It's coming next session. Obviously, I'll remind you guys before then. But yeah, and my one tip is kind of, I don't want to say the opposite of math, but it is. Sometimes keep it simple. If you can't think of a way to upscale Old Maid or chess, don't force it.
Yeah, just do regular Old Maid.
Yeah, I think so. You know,
Tic-tac-toe.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I know that seems kind of ridiculous, but I am super bad about this. As you guys know, of like, again, overthinking something, and it's like, but it could be this, and you're like, no, just take it down a notch,
Yeah.
and it'll be fine. So don't try. Sometimes you got to walk away from what it is you're doing, and reassess and reevaluate what are you trying to get across. And like I said, if you think the riddle's too hard, it's impossible for your players. If you think it's too easy, it's probably just hard enough. I actually really like that. I never thought of it that way, but
Oh, I have an
Uh-oh.
idea, guys.
uh-oh.
I have an idea. It's almost like a homework assignment for all of us.
I'm
Yeah, I
doing
gotta-
0.
I
So-
got enough homework, man.
I got an idea. Okay, what if there's like a homework assignment at the end of these episodes, and next time we play a game, we have to implement this.
That's not okay. Well, I've already got 100 because this is what's happening.
So, like, say now the homework assignment is we have to either put a puzzle or a trap in our game, and then after we all do it, next episode we can reflect on how well that worked.
Well, first of all, those are lofty expectations to think all three of us are getting a game in 1 week.
Well, up to maybe not a week, but like down the line, we can be like, and call back to the trap
Yeah.
and puzzle episode.
Yeah.
We finally were able to all do one.
No, yeah, no, I know. I was just messing with you, but speaking of which, I think it's my turn next. So I should probably get ready. Like I said, I had a literature class that I forgot I signed up for start last week. So my whole schedule has been Willy Wonka in this way and that way, and trying to get ready for that. So I still have an ethics debate I haven't finished. Gotta take care of that before tomorrow. So that's why I haven't had a lot of time to write, and that's why I've literally embraced the keeping things simple, because sometimes life like this happens, and if your friends want to get together and play. And sometimes simple is the most fun, because sometimes you just gotta turn your brain off. So I know that's how I am a lot of times with you guys. It's like, I'm tired. I don't want to do I just want to kill things, and or I don't want to do this, and I think everybody has those days, and yeah, sometimes keeping it simple is the best. But, all right, guys. Well, if you've got nothing else, I think that's kind of it for this week. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. If you are looking for an audio only version of the show, check all your podcast areas. We're all over all the major areas: Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, even. So
the Kraken rises.
we're everywhere. As always, I always kind of say this for last. We do have a Patreon. If you guys want to support us in that way, we're eternally grateful just for you guys watching and listening. But we do have that as well, and we're gonna put that to good use if we ever get anything. I know we've talked like microphones and webcams and stuff like that. So trust me,
we're in the works.
We're making everything better for you guys. But as always, have a great rest of your week, and have a good weekend and happy gaming. See you guys next week.
It's a trap.